Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the 2022 Military Bowl matchup between the UCF Knights and the Duke Blue Devils. Both teams have had good seasons getting to this point. UCF, one of the top teams in the American Athletic this season. They finished out as the runner-up of the conference, and they're taking on Duke, one of the big surprise teams of the ACC. Well, we go over a full game preview and prediction on this match period today, starting with your team trends. UCF lost to Tulane in the American Athletic Championship game, 20-45 was the final score. And it was just Tulane's year in the American Athletic. I mean, you had UCF and Cincinnati that were both also top teams in the conference, but Tulane just had a great season and they ended up winning the conference. But UCF turned out to be the runner-up. They finished out the season at 9-4. Overall, a good season for UCF. Duke on the other side, though, this team really surprised a lot of people, including myself. I didn't expect Duke to even really be in contention for a bowl game, considering the first-year head coach, and also, I mean, you consider the inexperience of this team. I mean, it looked as if it was going to be another terrible season for Duke, but it ended up being a great season. This team got up to 8 wins. You could consider them to be one of the better teams in the ACC this season. They beat Wake Forest to finish out the regular season 34-31, which, I mean, Wake Forest heading into the season at such high expectations, that's definitely not a game that many would have predicted back in the offseason. Duke beating Wake Forest. Games be on Wednesday, December 20th in Annapolis, Maryland. Your kickoff is 2 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going with Duke by a field goal here, so Duke is favored by 3. Over-under is 62.5, and the FBI is going with UCF, 57%. So this is one of those more rare occasions where the spread and the FPI are disagreeing with each other. This is also the first matchup between UCF and Duke in history. Stat comparison for this one, UCF is 20th in points per game, 40th in points allowed. So, and this is a talented team on both sides of the ball. Offensively, they're averaging 34 points a game. Defensively, they're allowing 23. So, you know, both sides of the ball have been good for UCF this season. They are a strong rushing team. You got John Rice Plumlee, who is the starting quarterback, but he has been the lead rusher for this team as well. I mean, he's rushed for over 800 yards and 11 touchdowns on the season, which is that's pretty outstanding out of a quarterback. He is a true dual threat quarterback, and so for UCF, this team has turned out to be one of the top rushing offenses in the country. They're 8th in the nation in rush yards a game. They're 54th in pass yards a game in comparison. And then for yards allowed, they're 83rd in passing, 84th in rushing. As for Duke, they're 32nd in both points per game and points allowed. So yeah, pretty consistent on both sides of the ball there. They're getting 33 points a game, allowing 22. So overall, yeah, great stats for Duke this season. They're 53rd in pass yards a game, 43rd in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, they're 113th in passing defense, but 17th in rush defense. So for UCF, what that means is it's going to be tough to run the ball on Duke, but you might have some success passing it on them. I mean, Duke's allowing an average of 262 pass yards a game. So if UCF was a strong passing team, which they are a good passing team, but it's especially the rushing game that UCF has had success. And so, I mean, if UCF was a strong team in the passing game and they had a big air raid offense, I'd be very concerned for Duke in this matchup, but it's not that way. Duke is a strong team in the rush defense. That is something to keep in mind in this matchup. Recent matchups, UCF lost to Tulane 20-45. Once again, that was in the conference championship game, and I mean, you have to give massive props to what Tulane's done this season, though. I mean, that's a team that was just 2-10 last season, and they flipped the script and went 11-2 this year. Really impressive what they've done. They definitely have been one of the big surprise teams of the year. But for UCF, they beat South Florida in the last game of the regular season, 46-39. They lost to Navy, 14-17. That's a game that they should have won. They beat Tulane back on November 12th, 38-31. And beat Memphis on the road back in early November, 35-28. As for Duke, they beat Wake Forest 34-31. Close loss against Pitt, 26-28. They beat Virginia Tech 24-7. Beat Boston College by a touchdown and beat Miami 45-21. So if you look at Duke, this team is 8-4. They've obviously had a good season, but if you look more in depth into the losses that this team took this season, they didn't get blown out once this year. I mean, if you look at their 4 losses, they lost to Kansas, they lost to Georgia Tech, North Carolina, and Pitt. And all 4 of those losses were 1-score losses. I mean, if you flip at least 2 or 3 of those, maybe make them wins for Duke, which they very well could have been, especially the Georgia Tech game. I mean, or even the Pitt game. You flip those two, suddenly this Duke team is 10-2, and they could very well have been 11-1. And I mean, they had a couple of close wins as well, but for the most part, I mean, this team also had multiple dominant wins. So Duke actually turned out to be a really a solid team this season, and that's something that shouldn't be underestimated. That's for sure. Key points: UCF 9-4. John Rise Plumlee once again is a true dual threat quarterback. He can run the ball super effectively. He's a good passer as well, even though his main strength is running the ball. And this is just a strong UCF offense. They finished up as the runner-up in the American Athletic, and defensively they did fall off a bit down the stretch. That is something to keep in mind. You look at the Tulane game, the conference championship, allowed 45 there. They allowed 39 to South Florida, which wasn't ideal. They allowed 20 against Memphis. Still got it done in that Memphis game and in the South Florida game, but I mean, defensively, this team could definitely be better. I mean, if you look at how this team was defensively at the start of the season, this team actually was really impressive. They had a low-scoring loss to Louisville, even though, I mean, just the offense couldn't get it done in that game. That was still a winnable game. But they allowed 14 to Florida Atlantic, 10 to Georgia Tech, 19 to SMU, 13 to Temple. All those games were in the early parts of the season, and this UCF defense was impressive. It was just after that, it was really once he got into November when this team started to have some trouble defensively. So that's something to keep in mind in this matchup. Defensively, they got to be good. And you're going up against the Duke offense that has really actually been super efficient this season. But for Duke, Riley Leonard, he has been a game changer for Duke. He has been impressive this season, and I mean, you look at his stats, you'll see why. I mean, he's passed for over 2,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, over 6 interceptions. Really impressive what he's done. He's also the leader in rushing for the Blue Devils, over 600 yards of rushing and 11 touchdowns. So that is something to keep in mind. Riley Leonard is a game changer. He's a playmaker for Duke. Blue Devils were competitive all season. I mentioned their 4 losses all came within 1 score. That is just super impressive what Duke has done to turn things around. I mean, this was a team that was just a bottom feeder in the ACC, and suddenly this season they have just completely flipped the script, and they were, I do believe, one of the top teams in the ACC this season. I mean, if you look at their division, they were just behind Pitt and North Carolina. But I mean, if you beat North Carolina, which Duke very well could have, and you have that win over Pitt, which they ended up losing by 2. I mean, if you have those 2 wins there, Duke is a 10-2 team playing for a conference championship. That's how close they were to winning that division. So it's been truly a great season for Duke, and I definitely want to put some attention on them because Duke truly has had a great season. They just haven't gotten too much attention for it. But main weakness for Duke, I would say, is the defense. Defensively, they could be better, but this offense has gotten it done multiple times this season. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for UCF and Duke coming up here in the Military Bowl. I'll be going with Duke to win this one, 31-27 is my predicted final score. I mean, Duke honestly could be a better team than the record shows based on their losses. And Riley Leonard, really like him, really like this team, and I expect this game to be close. I think it comes down to the wire, but Duke gets the win in the end, 31-27. And I mean, this one's tough because I also like UCF, but even though defensively UCF has not played as well down the stretch, that's my main concern with the Knights. I do still think they at least keep themselves in this ball game, but Duke's going to get the win in the end, 31-27. So I'll say 55% towards Duke, over under 62.5. Give me the under for this one and Duke to cover the spread in the end. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.